Today, I'm honored to speak with Sally K. Norton, MPH, an Ivy League trained nutritionist, public health researcher, and the author of the best selling book, Toxic Superfoods: How Oxalate Overload is Making You Sick and How to Get Better. After earning her nutrition degree from Cornell University and a master's degree in public health, Sally spent years working in medical education and public health research at major medical schools. But it was her own unexpected healing journey that led her to question many of the nutrition recommendations we've accepted as healthy for decades. Since then, she became one of the leading experts in dietary oxalates, helping people better understand how certain healthy foods may contribute to chronic symptoms in some individuals. Today, we're talking about oxalates, picky eating, family health, and what parents should know about nutrition through a whole child lens. Sally, welcome to the Livin'Sky Podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
I've been looking forward to this for so long. So when people Google you or look you up online, they will almost always find the word oxalates attached to your name. And most of us have never heard of the term. So can you just let people listening here know what are oxalates and why should parents know about them?
Well, it's true that it's like a foreign word, although thanks to social media, it's starting to be shared around. And the only place you would normally have heard about it is kidney stones. So oxalate is a tiny little compound that starts off as oxalic acid. And this acid is very tiny. It's made in nature. It comes down in acid rain. It's made in the soil and plants make it. So it's part of our natural environment. It is very small and it has this power of grabbing minerals. So then it's called oxalates because it tends to form these compounds. It's a salt, like sodium and chloride are two different compounds that come together. Mm-hmm. Because there's a positive sodium and a negative chloride, and they come together because of positive, negative, opposites attract, right? Well, oxalate is the same thing. Oxalic acid is a negative, can be two negatives. Calcium and minerals tend to be positive. So you've got two positives in calcium, and you tend to see in nature, plants and so on create oxalic acid, and then they turn it into calcium oxalate. And that's the fundamental ingredient in a kidney stone. So if you know anyone who's had a kidney stone, hopefully the doctor said, this is often an oxalate stone. We can test you for this, but 80% of kidney stones are going to be that. And they should have that conversation. Like, did you know that this is in popular foods right now that we eat a lot of? You probably should chill on that. That should be normal standard patient advice. We've known this for a very long time, probably 250 years.
Wow. And of course, it's probably not discussed much in medical school or really not talked about.
No, in nutrition school where I went, you read about how it can grab the calcium in the foods, and too much of this plant toxin plus others like tannins, which are in tea and berry, tend to grab calcium and lower calcium absorption.
Yeah.
We knew in the early years of nutritional science, because we were really just discovering the vitamins around the turn of the last century and kind of straightening out like how much we need in the 30s, 20s, 1930s and 20s. So by the mid 1930s, we knew that if you gave spinach to an infant, you would create a severe calcium and iron deficiency in the child.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
And how did we lose this knowledge? Why is this not common knowledge where the pediatricians are screaming like, be careful when you're starting solids. Like, these are not really superfoods you're feeding your child.
It's really frustrating because right from the beginning, we had all this studies on animals and human infants. And right from the beginning, the Medical Association had this nutrition council thing where they did a journal on nutrition, because back then, nutrition was part of medicine, of course. It should be, right? And they deliberately said, you know what, even though we know turnip greens are better and you don't cause that calcium deficiency with turnip greens, mustard greens, and these cabbage family vegetables, but you do with chard beet greens and spinach. But we're not going to bother telling anybody that because we don't care. I think they wanted simple messaging, and they wanted to not have to deal with it at some level. And so they canceled their own science right from the beginning. And then even though we've rediscovered this problem with deficiency, especially in babies, but the real question is, do you get any calcium from these high oxalate plants? And basically the answer is no, you get no calcium, very little iron, very little mineral nutrition really, but mostly it's the calcium is the big problem, which is interesting because people are now afraid of calcium, but it is so essential. Yeah. And we knew this back in the 80s when I was in school. We were still very concerned about inadequate consumption of dairy products because that was such an important protective food. And in the context of a plant diet that has things that have this oxalic acid in it, dairy becomes especially important.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's so much messaging out there now criticizing dairy, right? Dairy is definitely something that there's a lot of fear mongering going on around. And then we have the raw dairy discussion, how that is so dangerous because of perhaps parasites or something being in there. And then we have the dairy in the stores that are filled with just vitamin D and they're pasteurized and they're in these plastic containers. So I just feel like it's so hard to get the right idea, especially for moms who are trying to figure out what is the best thing for my child without being afraid. So what is your take on dairy? And is this something that kids should be consuming nowadays?
If you can get a quality dairy product, it is the easiest way to get enough nutrients in your child. It is very versatile. You can do a lot with it. Humans, as mammals, we start off with mother's milk.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. That stuff is designed to make an infant robust, grow well, protect them from infection and so on. And so we have used the milk of other mammals for a very long time, and it's quite helpful in childhood to get the whole array of nutrients in milk. Now, unfortunately, milk became highly regulated 100 years ago because of cheating in the dairy industry. And when you have big urban centers like New York City who needed to bring in milk from the countryside, that's a very perishable product. And it's also a daily delivered. People got milk almost every day delivered, like a fresh quart every day, because it needed to be fresh because of its perishability. You need to keep it cold, but you don't have refrigerated trucks. You have to use ice blocks. It's complicated. And people would cheat and they'd water it down and add powders and just it was terrible. And some of these animals were getting just leftover mash from the production of whiskey and things like this. So the quality of the milk became very untrustable. It was just not consistently good. And people were getting sick from the milk. So there became a fear of milk being a way to deliver diseases. And it was a time when people were dying of TB and other infectious diseases. It was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
So we centralized dairy and made it pasteurized or certified, at least, where certified was the best quality milk because that would be inspected and tested for organisms and still delivered raw. But the solution was to pasteurize it and process it in controlled facilities and try to regulate it so it wasn't an adulterated, nasty product. And what that did was it clearly showed quickly that you could make more money doing it that way. So the dairy industry really helped promote the regulations to restore the confidence from consumers, restore the reputation, and clinch it as a profitable food. But now with the reduced consumption, producing dairy is not a profitable business. So we've lost a lot of dairy farms. And if you want quality milk, often you need to go straight to the farmer and get some kind of milk delivery program. And it's nice if you can get truly healthy milk from dairy cows, like the Jerseys and the cows really produce good milk. Or you can get it from other animals too, milk and so on. There's lots of ways to find quality milk now where there wasn't 30 years ago. It was really hard to get. And more grocery stores are selling milk in glass that is not homogenized. Homogenization destroys the structures of the fat and is considered potentially bad for you in terms of the fat quality. But I would like to see people who are not allergic to milk use it and find the best milk they can and use it.
And I think dairy is something that neutralizes oxalates too in food, right? So if we are having spinach, which is considered to be like one of the healthiest foods, quote unquote, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think one way to neutralize some of the toxins in it is through dairy. So
a little bit. Neutralize is a too strong a word, really.
Okay.
Because what we're doing is the oxalic acid is liberated in your digestive system. And the more watery the delivery, like if you're using almond milk, people are starting using that, pretending that's like milk. And that's the worst thing you could do for your kid is give them almond milk, cashew milk, or oat milk. Those would be terrible. If you have to make some kind of fake milk, do not let it be almond milk. But almond milk has very watery, so it dilutes that oxalic acid, makes it very easily absorbed. And even when you add calcium to those commercial products, it's still absorbed. It just reduces the amount of absorption. So it might cut it by a third or a half. But for a little kid, it's still too much oxalate in the almond milk. And so in the absence of dairy, that's when oxalic acid becomes even more problematic because your absorption rate, that is, absorption is nutrition speak for it moves from the food into your bloodstream.
Mm.
The body takes it in, the body absorbs it, takes it in. We call that absorption. So that's that bioavailability. First step of bioavailability in nutrition is that the body is able to pull it out of the food. Now, a lot of things that we think are in the foods aren't bioavailable, like the supposed calcium in spinach.
Mm.
In those old rat studies in the 1930s, they were giving spinach to the rats thinking there was calcium there as a source of calcium. And that's when they discovered that the female rats could not get pregnant, could not maintain a pregnancy. The only one of the test rats that got all the way to delivery delivered stillborns and then ate the babies. She was so nutritionally deficient.
Right.
It was really bad for her fertility that to be calcium deficient from a high calcium food, spinach. That's zero bioavailability or negative. They actually think it's like not only do you not get calcium, it causes you to lose calcium from other foods in that diet.
Good.
So that's an important concept that is not understood online well, and people look up numbers and say, oh, it has all this calcium. That's ridiculous. That is not bioavailable. That's not getting into the body. And then stage 2 of bioavailability is it free to become a nutrient that does what it does in the body? But if you're absorbing oxalic acid into the bloodstream, the calcium ions that need to be there might get trapped with oxalic acid, which is like a kidnapper, kidnaps that critical nutrient in the blood. And if you have too quick a drop in the calcium in the bloodstream, all kinds of problems occur. Things like heart palpitations could occur because the pacemaker, which is a neurologic tissue, is keeping the heart beating. It needs the right calcium ions to work. And when there's too few of them, it gets confused and just kind of flutters and starts acting badly. So you see this easy neurotoxicity and cellular toxicity because it's messing up the calcium ions that control how cells work.
Then we're having all these nutritional deficiencies, and then we're being told like, okay, well, you're missing all these vegetables in your diet, and then you're just kind of like feeding into the problem.
Yes. This is the arena where trying to do better, trying to eat healthy can ruin your health.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me and so many of my clients. And it's devastating if you're a fetus or an infant or a newbie learning to eat solids. This is a terrible time to be messing up your electrolytes and your nutrients.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. So many of my listeners are really trying hard to feed their children healthy foods, and we're still being told so much that healthy equals vegetables and equals fruits and all these products that we're being marketed to in the food industry. So what are some foods parents often think are healthy that may actually be causing problems for them?
Kiwi, beets, sweet potatoes, quinoa, bran, Swiss chard, beet greens, and spinach, almonds, cashews, peanuts, and then there's potatoes. And chocolate's being marketed as so healthy for you, which is amazing since it's full of cadmium, lead, oxalates, and theobromide and sugar. And good gracious, people are saying, oh, this is like doctor food. This is like so many doctors are promoting things like chocolate. So then you don't feel so bad about giving your kid chocolate milk, which is not ruining the milk, or chocolate cake on their first birthday, or, no.
Yeah, I know. And it's being so normalized, right? And then also like so commonly practiced because then we're taking our kids to birthday parties and we have like school events and sports and things. And these are often things that are being offered there. So it's so hard to get away from.
I don't know how parents do it today. Honestly, for the last 15, 20 years, it's just a junk food, sugar fest everywhere you go. And that's considered okay. And it just isn't. It's just not the way to raise children. They need their nutrition. Teenagers too. When you get as far as teenagehood, your next goal is to be able to be fertile. Like this is the time to build your nutrition so you're capable of conception and carrying a baby to full term and delivering good milk to the child. Like we should really think of the child's body as sacred for growth in the future, particularly when they get as far as high school. But high school and so on is often a time where girls are dieting. They're living on diet sodas and candy and skipping lunch at school. And it's just not a good setup. And unfortunately, This problem of oxalic acid getting into the bloodstream also affects those circulating cells. It can harm the vascular tissue, but also in the blood, you've got red blood cells that are supposed to be delivering oxygen that can get sick and explode and die young. And you've got the circulating monocytes, the immune cells that are supposed to protect you from infection. But one study showed, looking at 40 adult volunteers, that most people within 40 minutes of a spinach smoothie have such damaged immune cells they cannot fight infection. So if you have a kid who's prone to ear infections, strep infections, you name it, and they're getting this high oxalate food, that could be why.
Wow.
I think that's what happened to me. I had strep and ear infections as a kid, and they took out my tonsils when I was 5. And I'm quite sure that the rhubarb we had, this is another one I didn't mention. Rhubarb's getting really popular. It's like it's supposed to have some like magic in it. But I like it because I grew up on it and we played with it. We ate the rhubarb stalks as kids, as when we played house. And then my mom would make rhubarb crisp, which I adored. And she was eating this way with the beet greens and the rhubarb and the potatoes while she was pregnant with their kids. So I think I was one of those fetuses and children who was already in trouble with oxalates, and hence I lost my tonsils, and that was super traumatic. As a 5-year-old, the pain of that and the overwhelmingness of being in the hospital in a surgical condition, it was not fun. And it made me very clear that being sick sucks, and you should not want to be sick, and being healthy is where it's at, where you get to play and have a good time. And so I decided in 7th grade that nutrition was the career for me, to help people not get sick.
Wow.
And I had no idea that like rhubarb was one of the culprits.
Wow. My goodness. So it just literally goes against most of the health messaging around nutrition that we hear. So for moms who are listening to this for the first time and they didn't realize there were so many plant toxins, what are some good first foods you would recommend to them as they are starting their baby's feeding journey? Because for me, my son is 4.5 years old, and I also didn't know back then any better. So the first food he had was avocado. Then it was sweet potatoes, which now we know they're full of plant toxins and oxalates. So I
still popular choices, and
such a popular choice, still be recommended.
The more you pay for these jarred baby foods, the more oxalate you get in general. And the baby snacks and little crunchies are all full of high oxalate ingredients. So that's not a great idea. If it were my child, I'd be giving him sardines and egg yolks,
exactly.
Cheese.
Yes. Bone marrow, all the good stuff. Liver.
Yeah, that would be me. And then when you get into the wanting to do some fruits or something, you can try some melon and see how they do on that. But really, it's okay to kind of minimize the vegetables. I think if fruits and some good quality rice for some carbs, where you make sure that it's not high in arsenic and know how to handle that. And I talk about that in not in terms of babies, but in this cookbook that's coming out in November of 2026, I talk a lot about how you need to prepare these things carefully for everyone so that the phytates, the oxalates, the arsenic are not a big problem. And that's another thing, is that plants, especially the cabbage family, collect heavy metals from the soil. And the grains do. Rice is big on that, and chickpeas collect glyphosate and things like that. So that's all like, oh my gosh, why do we have to have so many problems in our food? It's a little overwhelming. You're trying to like pay your bills and take care of your kids. But ultimately, there are far fewer of those contaminants in animal foods. So when in doubt, find an animal food. There might be a nice bone the child could teeth on, beef bone or something, or even a pork rib bone might make a good teething rather than the plastic. So there's a bigger question of like toxicity in general. And I have like looked for, why do I feel sick and toxic for so many decades? Why am I so wiped out? What is wrong with me? I'm doing everything right. And you don't suspect the sweet potatoes that I was pigging out on in the Swiss chard that I would have every week. You just aren't suspecting these things. So I became really chemically sensitive to things like rayon and plastics and all this stuff. So there's this bigger arena now, especially with young people who are at the age of having kids and trying to get pregnant, where you do need to look out for plastics and heavy metals and oxalates.
Yes.
Like you don't get a pass because it's natural. I think a lot of people, they make sense, too much plastic. Everyone's talking about that now. It makes sense. Like, oh, You shouldn't have varnish or harsh cleaners. That sort of makes sense to people. They're now remembering, oh yeah, Teflon, stop doing that. But with plants, they're like, oh, it's natural. It can't be that bad. No. Are you kidding? This is not Disney, people. Nature is a rough place. And plants have to have what they have to have to survive and defend themselves. They're standing there pretty still and they're being attacked by funguses, insects, cows, and other eaters, and us. Like, they are like, back off, everybody. Leave us alone. They have reproductive aims. If they were sweet and non-toxic, they would be extinct because they would have been eaten to death. The only plants that can survive in nature are tough, toxic, self-defending things with barbs of all kinds. And the barbs are big enough to poke your fingers when you're trying to weed them out of the garden. Or they're so big enough that they're scarring your teeth, because the plants actually turn oxalic acid into calcium crystals for self-defense. So the calcium oxalate crystals that are most designed for self-defense are these toothpick-shaped shards. They're like splinters of glass, designed to look like a little toothpick, super small. They can penetrate 2 cells deep in the mouth and throat and so on when they're liberated to do that. And your mouth and lining and all that is really just 1 cell deep. It's like, it's not very thick. So it's pretty interesting that stuff is so hard too. It's harder than your teeth. And they find dental microwear from these calcium oxalate crystals. So the point of this is, plants are not kind to you because you're not kind to them. They are trying to make sure that the beetle or whoever's biting them feels it. And often these crystals, like in the kiwi, these double pointed toothpick crystals, the rhaphides, are in the bubble of material that's around the seed, protecting the seed. You can think of it as a fortress of swords and spears protecting the next generation. Makes total sense for the kiwi vines to do that, to protect their babies. And we're like, well, he's making this fruit for me. No, that's not what I mean.
Yeah, I know. There's so many better things to be had. And kiwi in particular, I feel like so many people have almost like an immediate reaction where it's like a little bit tingly, or it feels different when you're eating it. And I wonder if that's because of the way they're designed, kind of like almost protecting themselves right away. I don't know.
They're actually quite acrid, and like the American persimmon, the wild fruits are like, they're not that great. And tomatoes started off as these little bitter berries. And what's happened is the wild plants are kind of harsh, bitter, and not so exciting. We have domesticated plants for thousands of years. The potato is an invention. Corn on the cob is an invention. The modern tomato is an invention. The entire cabbage family is an invention of human playing around with plants. Now, plants are, because we can save their seeds and we can cultivate them and make a great hobby out of them and use them to weave baskets and make clothing and build ropes to cut down their trunks and make big ships out of plant material, just wood and fiber. You can make your sails, your ropes, and your sailboat and go conquer the world with a little bit of iron as spears. Like, we've used plants, we've played with them for a very long time. And what we've got in the grocery store, it's a human invention. There's no wild plants in the store. They have to be specially cultivated and curated under very careful conditions. Certain strawberries have to be under tunnels, and you have to have special watering and keep the insects off of them and so on. It's like, if you try to really grow a garden with your blueberry plants and your strawberry plants and your lettuce plants and all this, let me tell you, the chipmunks and the squirrels are going to have a really nice meal, and you get whatever is left over with the bite in it.
It's true. It's true. But what about seasonality? Does that make it a little bit healthier? So it's like a little bit better to eat fruits in the summer because the strawberries are growing right now, and the cantaloupe is and the watermelons are growing right now, maybe seasonally where you are locally, depending on where you live. But with seasonality, is that truly healthier for us?
Well, it's very interesting with the oxalates. In the first talk I ever gave teaching about oxalates, I think it was 2017 at an ancestral health conference. And that was exactly my point, is that we no longer have seasonality. So we're eating high oxalate foods like spinach year round, wheat greens and sweet potatoes and potatoes themselves year round. And I think before modern commerce, and even before, we really weren't that sedentary kind of root cellar kind of people. We were usually migratory, following the flocks and the bison and the woolly mammoth before that around the planet to be where the hunting was good. Right. And so, and weirdly, we managed to, in the ice age, make it on icy places and live like winter most of the time, living off woolly mammoth, not plants. But as the ice receded and you had summertime and you could find fresh foods and dig up sweet potatoes and dry some berries and take them with you, it was still not the centerpiece of the diet. But in the wintertime, sometimes all you could get was caribou and fish, and that's what you'd be eating for several months. Well, when you eat an animal-based foods like that, you don't eat oxalates. So in the wintertime, you would stop eating oxalates and then the body can relieve itself. Because one of the big problems with oxalates is that we're eating more than we're designed to handle when we're eating these high oxalate foods, and then it accumulates in the body. But once you have the wintertime where you're just living on caribou and seafood, now you're not eating oxalates and the body can flush them out. So you get an annual washout of the plant toxins in the winter and some degree of recovery from their effects. But now we don't do that. We haven't really given up potatoes for the wintertime or the summertime or whatever and eaten them seasonally. I mean, potatoes have only been in the human diet really for 400 years, except for in Peru. So that's a novel food. Even worse, things like peanuts, where it's only been 100 something years that they've really been in the diet. 150 max. So, the idea of making these novel foods a standard daily staple year round puts us in a whole different situation. Where you can be developing a gradual process over the years and be worse as you get older. So it can be bad enough in childhood where you're now prone to infections, you're not learning as well because the neurotoxicity of it makes it harder for a child to be able to focus or think well or make sense of things because your nerves are so much part of the learning process and they're so sensitive to the poisoning from the oxalates in the diet. It can also be adding up to deposits in the brain, the eyes, the bones and bone marrow, and the thyroid gland and other regulatory things that just can make your life unnecessarily miserable. And my message is like, you don't have to have these vegetables. You really probably don't even like them as much as you think you do. And yeah, they have texture and they add a lot of flavor and pleasure and culture. Various cultures have, capitalize on certain spices and certain vegetables to make some interesting national dishes and things like that. And that's all well and good for culture. And we still need to protect our health. So we need to do those things in a context where we bring it back down to a level of toxicity that the body can manage. But when you're a baby, you don't need to be managing toxicity. You need to be managing growth and learning.
Exactly. So are there any fruits and vegetables that are okay for babies to have? Or do you think that just animal-based for as long as we can is the way to go?
I think there's a mixture there. I think you want to introduce flavors and colors and textures, and fruits are often a way to do that, just not the kiwi, not the blackberry, not the star fruit. And if you stay away from them, and sometimes juice is actually a little bit less oxalate and sometimes completely less oxalate. Juices from the citrus fruit really are low oxalate. And the oxalates that are in the fruits are more likely to be what we call insoluble crystals, so that they're a little bit less bioavailable. So I would say fruits you can play around with. I think some carbs are helpful. You need some energy, especially as a growing child. And rice is probably good the research suggests that rice grown in India and Asia generally is lower in arsenic. Their soils haven't been as contaminated with pesticides and other things that are adding arsenics and heavy metals to the soil. So buy an organic rice from India, like a jasmine rice, soak it in the fridge with a little vinegar so that it's not growing organisms, and drain it and then cook it. Have a pretty low arsenic, safe carbohydrate source. But I don't think, vegetables, introduce them to a green bean, introduce them to them for flavors, textures, variety, so they know the names of them, they know how to work with them in the kitchen, they know what a cucumber is, they know what a pickle is. That's all well and good, but don't think that that's the backbone of good nutrition.
Yeah, right. Well, for me, because I'm a feeding specialist and I work with picky eaters in particular, that is typically, something that parents worry the most about because they're coming to me and they're saying, my child's diet is very limited and they're just not eating vegetables. They're not eating fruits. And they might not be eating a ton of meat, but that's not typically the concern for the parent, is that they're not eating their fruits and vegetables. That's one of the main concerns. So what would you say to those parents?
Mothers torture themselves over this and they start looking for the best gummy vitamins to make up for it. They're so disturbed that this child is just not going to be right. And really what kids need are minerals and protein.
Yeah.
And you just don't really get minerals out of plants very well. There just isn't as much there as you think. And you don't need very much vitamin C. There's enough in the lettuce or even in liver. I mean, a little bit of liver is a great thing for a kid because it does have a little vitamin C in it. And fresh meat, if you don't overcook it, has a little bit of vitamin C in it. But you really need the minerals, the vitamins, and the protein. And say, for example, B1, the best source of vitamin B1 is pork. So even a piece of ham, which would be like where I'm from or where I live anyway, in Virginia, I know all the founding fathers really let them survive the winter. It was like biscuits, raisins, and ham in the wintertime down here in Virginia because you just didn't have all that other stuff. Well, how many fruits are growing in Virginia in the wild? Not much. Not much. So in the past, we didn't have this cultivated California food coming in on trains, boats, and airplanes from all over the place continuously like we have now. Although, we really have been, thanks to importing things, certainly from here a long time, bringing in pineapples from the Caribbean has been something we've done such a long time that the pineapple is a symbol of hospitality because it meant the boat was in, we got some food here, now we can have a party. So you put out your pineapple like, yeah, they came back from the Caribbean. So we've been enjoying fruits, and fresh produce for a long time. But our staples are meat. Our real staples are animal foods. Yeah. Milk, eggs, and meats have always been a human staple. That's our niche in the ecosystem, is to kind of sit around over grassy prairies and watch the herd come by and pick out the best fat animal that we want to spear and have for a communal dinner.
Yeah. And fatty because fat is not bad for us. It's also been demonized so much
and women and babies really need their fat.
Yeah absolutely.
There's nothing cuter than an infant with big fat thighs, right?
yes
You want to see the chubby baby. That's how you know the baby's healthy.
Yeah.
And women need butter and fats like butter in order to be healthy, happy, and kind. There's a great deal of satisfaction and joy and peace in butter for women. And true, even in older age, a low cholesterol level is a risk factor for stroke, especially for women. And so they've artificially suppressed what the cholesterol levels should be in humans, and it's dangerous to be low cholesterol. So you don't need to worry about baby cholesterol. They can have their egg yolks as runny as you can get them to eat. Now, there's a texture thing with eggs. Not all kids will eat eggs. Some, with kids, you just never know what you're getting. I mean, it's a roll of the dice. And you have to flow with it and try to not be that neurotic parent best you can, which is not easy to do these days. But it's, for every parent who's making an effort, kudos for you, because, it is just a rough world with all this conflicting information. Sure. Those of us who are out here in our 60s, we've been around a while. We've already done the vegetarian and veganism way back in the 80s when it was a big deal, right? We've been there. You don't need to repeat our mistakes. We're coming back from that big experiment saying, oopsie, big boo-boo.
Right.
And yet young women now are really emphasizing plant-based. It's very sheesh and cool. And somehow they think that's saving the planet, which is not really a defensible position. And being told that cows are melting down the planet, which is not a defensible position. And none of that matters. Human beings have to be healthy in order for us to not be a burden on the planet. When you're sick, you are a burden. You are producing plastic trash and you are consuming stuff because you're sick. You're overdoing the Band-Aids, the drugs, the medicine, the IVs, the shots, the diagnostic tests. That's just a big environmental disaster. Getting healthy is good for the environment, and getting healthy means eating real food that humans are meant to eat. Getting back to that ancestral thinking. Where did we come from? We came from hunters who hunted woolly mammoth, and we're still that. We may wish to evolve into something more civilized and acceptable and live on lentils, but it's really not the best choice.
Yes. I can vouch for that. As a former vegan for 3 years, it destroyed my health. It just completely. And I had no idea, but my cravings for meat got so loud after 2.5 years. So it lasted for a while, but it was just not something I could no longer just ignore. And no matter what I thought about just being friendly to the animals and just trying to go with the flow and being deep into that thinking of plant-based equals health, I couldn't ignore my biology anymore. And thank goodness I didn't, because I was able to build so much. But woof, yes, it's rough.
You were way smarter than I was, because I was vegetarian vegetarian for 8 years and then vegan for 8 years. And then it was my illness that was forcing me out of it, but I wasn't
Yes.
feeling like craving for meat. I was feeling icky about it. And it was, but I became allergic to the legumes and wheat. And like, there's nothing left to eat as a vegan. If you can't eat your tofu, you're really in trouble. And God, I wish I was as smart as you and quit after a couple of years. But I had so much dogma in my head, so much reinforcement in my kind of liberal academic space I was in, and my social circle was very in that sphere. So you just don't throw yourself out of your beliefs and your social circle that easily. And that's the sad part about such what's going on in nutrition now is culty. And
Yes,
you're stuck in a cult.
exactly. You really are. And it's so hard because you were the person who showed up at family parties and you're like, no, 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 I can't have that. I'm vegan. And then you show up one day when you're like out of that and it's
With a tomahawk steak.
Yes, yes. Be like, oh yeah, I was wrong. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
My Toxic Superfoods, the whole last chapter is basically about that. That now that you finally figured out that it was your spinach and your sweet potatoes and your almonds and almond milk that has ruined you,
Yes.
and now you're on the path back to health and fixing your osteoporosis and your arthritis and your kidney stones and your tooth pain and your vision problems and your cataracts are going away. All this great stuff is happening. Nobody cares because
Right.
you have lost your credibility.
Yes.
You dummy. Like you
Yes.
always were the know-it-all in nutrition. And now you think you know something completely opposite. Well, nobody's listening. So
Nobody's listening.
I have this ridiculous task to give an impossible message from a point of view of, yes, I've been trying to figure out what to eat since I was before kindergarten.
Yes.
And I finally figured it out at age 49. And out here at 62, I'm like, please, like all that experience is actually worth something. I want to give it to you for free so you don't have to suffer and do this long trek into finally figuring out the truth.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's so important. I'm so happy that you're doing this because there's just not enough people talking about it still. So, oh my gosh, everybody go read the book. And I have it too. I have the ebook. And then my dad, we met you at Meat Stock, out of all places. He has the copy, but he still has his garden and he's so conflicted. And I'm like, Dad, go back to the book. Like, read this because it's so important.
My garden is all ornamentals now. And I've always preferred that anyway. And tell him he can reach out to me if he wants a picture for inspiration.
Yes, yes.
I really love being off what I call the tyranny of the harvest, because when you're facing a bucket of tomatoes to now cook down in tomato paste or sauce or whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, it was enough work to get them to be that way and to fight off the squirrels. And now you've got to do something with them. I'm like, I'm so done.
I know, take care of your chickens. That's really where the gold is. Focus on the chickens. Yes, so good. But you touched on cholesterol and how important it is and how dangerous low cholesterol is. How about high cholesterol? Because there's so many people worried about their cholesterol levels. And I even have friends like whose husband went carnivore for a while and then his cholesterol got into the 300s level and then his doctor was like, stop it, like you're just a ticking time bomb. So what do we know about cholesterol? What is really going on?
Well, cholesterol is part of the healing process and part of the defending yourself from inflammation. I don't really know why it's going up into the 300s, but I do know if it was below 250, I would be scared to death that it's too low. As long as it's over 250 and under 400, I'm like, oh, that looks like it's perfect to me.
Yeah, right. I know. We need cholesterol to be healthy.
Yeah, cholesterol is your friend. It is kind of like the ambulance and the nanny and the friend who helps you have hormones. Yeah. So having enough around might help you have enough testosterone and other hormones that you need. It really has, I think when they look at plaques in the artery, they are mistaking the ambulance for the accident.
Yeah, right. It's very true. And there's, again, so much messaging around cholesterol because the food industry, I mean, they profit highly from telling us, the Lucky Charms cereals are better for your cholesterol than the ground beef. There's just so much out there. And it's so hard sometimes when you really don't know where to look.
And we have these simplistic ideas in our head as if the vascular system was a bunch of PVC piping. Mm-hmm. And that stuff can stick to them. No, this is living tissue. The vascular system is an organ of living tissue that's very wise, that's reading the world, reading what's in the blood, taking care of you. Very important organ that can get damaged with all this inflammation and toxicity. The things that's damaging this vascular system is nutrient deficiencies, and toxicities. Stress isn't helping either, but it's not an inert substance that lets stuff stick to it. No, no, no. What's happening is you're damaging cells with things like oxalic acid and oxalate crystals, and they start getting confused and they're reading the wrong recipe in the DNA.
Mm.
And they start acting like bone cells, and you get calcifications from all this. And you get this scar tissue forming because the oxalate, for example, interrupts the energy production of cells. So cells run out of energy and they don't reproduce fast enough. They have to make materials to duplicate themselves, proteins and so on. In order to do that, they need the energy to do it.
Mm.
And when oxalates around, they're low in energy, you're in a brownout state. So your production of cells goes down and cells will get old and die. So what happens is the fibroblasts come along and they produce scar tissue and kind of glue you together so you don't fall apart. And that's bad. The loss of healthy tissue that doesn't have enough energy, that brownout state is the basis of disease. And that's where you get this inflammation from the cell damage and the lack of energy. The immune system is like, oh my gosh, we got issues here. And so you got this inflammation. So inflammation is like this backbone, and the stress inside the cells that involves various suborganelles in trouble, like the mitochondria and the endoplasmic reticulum, get in trouble, and the cell is no longer controlling its calcium, which is the death threat. I mean, that is the end of things. And the oxalate does all these things. That is all the fundamental mechanisms of how you get old and cranky and disabled and injured and feel bad and get depression and anxiety. That's another thing, if your kid's mood and attitude is kind of weird or up and down, this oxalate can be one reason why. Anxious children who are afraid to go to bed or timid and so on, it might be a toxicity. The oxalates can do this. So your vascular system doesn't just let cholesterol stick to it. Your vascular system is fighting a war with toxins like oxalate. And so sometimes you can tell, but mostly you can't. The symptoms are often not there for you to tell, and they're going to happen 4 hours after the meal anyway. So when I would go to bed after a high oxalate dinner of sweet potatoes and Swiss chard, 4 hours later going to bed or 3 hours later, I would have hiccups and belching, and I would have pain and arthritis, and I would be exhausted and yet like not able to settle down. It turned out that was all the oxalate poisoning.
Wow. Wow.
Hiccups is a neurological problem. Any kind of tremors and twitches and things, the nerves are now firing. They're stuck on with this disruption in their calcium control, and you get spasms, and that's what the hiccups are.
Wow.
Same with the belching. You get cystic peristalsis all mixed up, and you get kind of bloaty and belchy and weird.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That's giving me a lot to think about too. That's really good to know, because a lot of kids have these issues, right? I mean, airway in general, and whenever you are getting hiccups as a kiddo, or you are having these like reflux issues
or constipation,
right? And then it trickles down from there. Yeah.
And sensitivity and moodiness, and sometimes you think, is this kid getting autistic or something? And so the same with autistic behaviors can be oxalate messing with the nervous system.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I want to also talk briefly about the microbiome and fiber, because with the microbiome, we're still getting a lot of messaging like, okay, in order for you to have a good microbiome, you need a lot of diversity. So I'm recommending 30 types of plants every single week so that you can have your diversity. And then you need your fiber, because then how are you going to poop, right? Or things like that. In order for you to be healthy, you need a lot of fiber. So what do you say to those ideas?
Well, remember, the vascular system is a living, sensible tissue. It's an organ. So is your gut. So the colon is a living organ, and that's really everything that's going on in the colon depends on the cells. And you can think of the cells of the colon as a gardener who's deciding what weeds have to go and what we want to grow in the colon. And the colon likes to make certain mucus and so on to feed the right bacteria, and has the cells really want to garden it. And in the colon, if they're healthy, they're consuming enough oxygen that you have an anaerobic environment. So right there, that's choosing anaerobes over aerobic bacteria. That's a sign of a healthy colon. But a lot of people are losing their anaerobes, including the ones that degrade oxalate, because their colon is sick. The same energy brownout and problems with cell function is happening in the gut cells as it might be happening in the vascular system or elsewhere. So the real problem is we need to not have a toxic, deficient cells in the colon, make them healthy, and they will consume the oxygen and garden that area and produce mucus and try to create some diversity there. And there's plenty of plants who live on animal proteins and so on, as well as, bacteria that can grow on those as well. as the plant materials. And it turns out that high oxalate foods mess with the microbiome and they kill off oxalate degraders even. It's so too much for them. And too much fiber tends to cause an overgrowth of bacteria.
Yes.
You're trying to like really grow a lot of it. Well, why do you need a really lot of it? You're not a fermentation chamber. That is for ruminants to grow a lot of it because they end up eating the bacteria. We don't eat the bacteria, we poop them out. So you get nice big logs of BM material. You know, the fecal material is big and watery and substantial because there's so many dead bacteria plus the fiber. But that's really just a problem for the colon. The colon's like, wait. This is too much. And I got to like send out immune cells and cut this down. So you've got an overgrowth, big weedy field of stuff in your colon. And that just makes the gut cells have to work harder and the immune system to cut that back. So I find fiber to be very inflammatory. It promotes constipation. It promotes digestive problems. And if you're doing things like beans and you're not cooking them properly, you could just end up with a destroyed gut.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's like pushing lots of variety and beans and whole grains and bran. This is high oxalate food that could create just more mayhem rather than the solution. And when I have clients who have constipation, I usually put them on like very low fiber diet and it gets better.
Yeah. And it takes a little while too, right? But then you are rebuilding and eventually that ends up in resolving a lot of these issues. Because I went through it myself, I as well. Then I was constipated for a while, but for me, a lot of information out here, but I had a lot of diarrhea issues. And then eventually once I worked on my gut, I was constipated and now it's no longer an issue. You have to rebuild and then eventually things are going to function the way they're supposed to when you really support your gut.
It does take time because the gut is a site of detoxing the body. Like you're eliminating things and it's a place where we eliminate oxalate as well. Most of the oxalate's coming out of the body in the urine for the kidneys, 90% of it, but there's these transporters in an effort to support the kidneys in the gut. And so it's a site of dealing with toxins. Like the colon has to deal with toxins. So it's taking a hit a lot of the time. It needs to be strong enough to keep rebuilding. But what it means is you can still be on a healing path, even if you've got gut problems still going on. You don't have to like have the perfect digestion in order to continue to get well. There's this fantasy that if you fix the gut, everything else fixes itself. No, if you fix the toxicity and quit eating oxalates and get enough nutrients, especially minerals and B1 and so on, the body will have the robustness to take care of business. And eventually the digestive tract gets better and better. Like most of us were fine when we were kids and could eat whatever. And then by the time you get into your 30s, you're like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah, exactly. That's the story. And I feel like now it's even sooner than that because of how toxic everything is, right?
Yeah. And kids giving like, oh, we're going to give them the spinach and the chocolate cake and the Skittles. Like all of those are poor choices.
Exactly. Don't be afraid of the animal products, guys. It's really important. Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to wrap up, but I know your cookbook is coming out in November. So if you can tell everybody where to get it, because I think it's a perfect thing for moms who are now thinking, okay, so what do I feed my kids? Where can they get your cookbook?
Yes. So I have this coming out with Random House, and it'll be in all the bookstores and available online where you buy books. You can go to my website, which is sallyknorton.com. I have a cookbook there that's going to be coming out later this summer. That's print on demand. It's been there as a PDF a long time, but I've got a new and better second edition, and I'm cleaning up the formatting and getting it ready to be print on demand. This essential low oxalate cookbook has photographs in it. It's about 75 recipes that is diverse in terms of here's some things for your vegan friends, here's some things and so on. It's got gluten-free flour and so on for people with health issues. So it's low in dairy, eggs, and gluten and no soy or anything like that for people with allergies. So even though we're trying to reach a broad audience here, it's also meant for people who are very having to really curate their diet.
Right.
And same with what's on my website. It's really designed so that people who can't eat some of these harder allergens like corn, wheat, eggs, milk, and so on can do it. So you can do low oxalate no matter what. There's no good excuses. You can stay a little bit vegan, you can stay vegetarian, you can stay gluten-free, you can stay dairy-free. It's not as easy, but you can do all of those things. And that's what I'm trying to show with the cookbooks.
Amazing. Yes, right. And just having that in mind, I think it's important. And then your book, Toxic Superfoods, it gives you a list of like high oxalate foods and which are lower in oxalates. So it's a really great material for you to have if you are trying to learn about what really is better for you to eat.
Yes. And it's for some people, they want even more information about what's the oxalates in food, and they can get this on my website, the Data Companion to Toxic Superfoods. This is a big chart with a whole bunch of information in the front that's color coded to give you a sense what a typical portion size. And you can tell with the dark colors that wouldn't be the good stuff to eat. That is chocolates. Dark chocolates are
Oh,
super
yeah.
and up here we've got corn flour products. They're not so bad, most of them, and which ones aren't so bad. Based on the limited data that we have, nutrition science hasn't taken oxalates seriously enough to really focus on this data collection and curation and understanding of how foods vary, but that can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sally, thank you so much. I could have gone on for so much longer, but thank you so much for teaching us about the dangers of oxalates. And I think this is so important for everybody to know, but especially moms with young kids as they're starting their feeding journeys and or they are having trouble with their eating. I mean, this information is so important. So thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I hope it gives some people peace of mind and not a reason to fret.
Yes, absolutely.